So let's start. Today for the Jain Migration History Project, I, Tine, Professor of Jain Studies at Ghent University, will be interviewing a very interesting member of the Jain community currently living in the UK, Madhusudan Shah. He's a dermatologist, a businessman, a head waiter, and now also a published author. As his memoirs, these memories have come out in print earlier this year. So Madhusudan grew up in Kenya, studied in Uganda, and is now living in the UK. And in today's talk, we're going to try and sort of talk about what that was like, that multiple move from India to East Africa to the UK, what motivated his family and himself in making these decisions and shifting all over the world. And we're also going to have a look at that book that was just published. So, Madhu, if I can call you Madhu, is that okay?
Yes,
okay.
Fine.
Perfect. Madhu, could you start by telling us a little bit about how your family ended up in Kenya?
Yeah. So, Tine, before I start, I most sincerely want to thank you first, and also the whole team of Double Migration History, that is Atul, Asmita, Pushpendra, Bijal, Alicia, and Surbi. And also to thank you people for giving Kundan an opportunity to talk to you, and now you are giving me an opportunity. And of course, what we realize after Kundan's talk is that because these talks are on YouTube, they can be accessed anywhere in the world, and that's the beauty of it. So thank you very much. So
sure, you're welcome.
Thank you. So basically, majority of our community moved to Kenya initially from India, and that immigration started about early 1900, and then continued all along the way. And the main reason was that our part of India is semi-arid, and it was a poor part of India. Majority of our people were farmers, and 1 year it will be good rains, 2 years there won't be much rain. So 1920 onwards, more and more people started immigrating, and my father immigrated in 1939 when he was 15 years old. From the village, he straight came to Mombasa and then to Nairobi, and he was given a job in a grocer's shop. So where he worked for 5 years. And in those days, you sleep in the shop at night and you work during the day, and the meals are provided by the owner of the shop. And he worked hard. He worked for 5 years with other young people and saved enough money. But during all this time, money was also sent to India for the parents and for the other siblings who were there. So in 1944, he went to India and he got married to my mother. And my mother, then in a year's time, followed him back to Kenya. And so both of them started their married life basically in Kenya. And I was born in 1948, and my two other sisters followed. And many of our people and even Kundan's family have a similar story. So leave India, come to East Africa, mainly to Kenya, and many of them settled in Nairobi as my parents did.
And do you have an idea? Your father went to Nairobi and he found that first job. Was it with a member of the community? Was it with a member of perhaps his village at home? Or was it just a question of finding whatever job was there?
So my father actually started working in a shop which actually belonged to somebody from the same community, but who was from the same village. And many of the first jobs will be with people whom you already have some sort of connection. And then, of course, you progress from there.
Okay, so then he got married, and when he was married, he started his own business.
When he was married and he came back to Kenya, then by that time, he had enough experience. He and his uncle asked him, what do you want to do? And he says, this time I want to start a business. So uncle says that I have started a business. Why don't you join me? So he and his uncle joined in the business, and that business continued and flourished for the next 27 years. And then in 1973, My father and his uncle had a good separation, and my father started his own business with his younger brother.
All right. Yep. So that was then for other members of your community, that pattern was quite common. So coming to Kenya, first working in a community member's shop or business to gain some experience. And then when there was a little bit of money in the till, they could go home, get married, and then start up their own cooperation.
Yeah, so basically, most of them didn't have much money. So what would happen is either two brothers or two cousins or two friends or the person in his wife's family member, they would get together to start a business, because 2 or 3 people might get together to start a business and work hard, and the business flourishes. And then later on, they may decide to start different businesses. This was the pattern in those days.
Okay. So you said you were born in 48. That means that you were young in Kenya. You were a child in Kenya in the 50s and the 60s. What was it like to grow up in that environment? We all know that there was a sizable Jain and Indian community, South Asian community there, but it's still quite far from India. It's still quite a different context. So what was it like? How did you experience this?
So of course, I was born in Kenya, and so many other children who were my age were all born in Kenya, and most of us lived nearby. Most of us spoke Gujarati. Some might speak Hindi, which we already knew, and the schools were near. The shops were nearby, and many of us stayed in bigger houses in which there were a number of families would be staying together. And of course, daytime you go to the schools where you also make new friends. Then after school, there is sports or games or other things. And we all got along very well with each other. And it was nice growing up in Nairobi.
So from what you tell me, it feels like it was a very much sort of a tight-knit community, because I read in your book that you also attended, you were one of the first to attend the Oshwal or the Jain nursery school too.
Yeah.
So did you have many contacts with children from other communities, other South Asian communities, but also African kids or European kids?
Yeah. So basically in those days, there were European schools, then there were Indian schools, and then there were African schools. This is in those days. And we stayed in an area where most of our community people were staying. And our community's main center was not very far from where we stayed. So the community had already started a primary school at some stage. And then they also started a nursery school. It so happened that when they started the nursery school, we were 3 years old. So we actually went to that nursery school. So it wasn't us, our community members only, but there were other Gujaratis who also came to that school. So, So that we were the first batch of that school, the nursery school.
Okay. So I know you've visited India a couple of times. They must have also talked about this with your parents, but do you feel that growing up in Kenya was very much different from how the situation was in India, or would have been in India if you'd grown up there?
So I first went to India when I was 18 years old, when I just finished my A-levels, and I actually stayed 3.5 months in India, and we stayed in Mumbai. But also stayed both my grandparents on my father's side and my mother's side, they were still in the villages. So we stayed in our village and in other villages for like 2 weeks. We also stayed in our main town in India called Jamnagar, and also toured around. But having spent 3.5 months in India and seeing the conditions there and other things, I thought that we were better off in Nairobi.
Okay, no, fair. So you went to nursery school, you went to primary school, and then at a certain point after those O and A levels, you need to decide what you're going to do. Are you going to go into business? Are you going to pursue further education? So could you tell me about that process, both sort of for you and the people in your peer group? You know, you have to make that decision. It's, let me see, you were born in 48, so it's somewhere in the 60s. You have to decide
Yes.
what to do with your life. So how was that? How did that work?
Okay. So basically the pattern was that almost everybody wants to study till O levels or till the age of 16. That is the first part of the high school.
Yeah.
And then many children at that time, because there would be a number of children in the family, many children, the firstborn usually joins the father's business around that age, because the father needs some help in the shop or his own business. The second and the third and the fourth, they now have an opportunity to go and study. So some would continue in the school to do further education, that is higher school, A levels. Some would go to India, and some would even come to England. But this is the time when we came to that age. There will be, after your A levels, again, the option is either you study locally or you go to England to study further, or you might do some other courses. In my case, in the very beginning, I used to, from young age, I used to go and help my father in the shop, and I really used to enjoy.
Yeah, so, I was going to say, aren't you the firstborn? Shouldn't you have gone into the business?
Yeah. So when till I finished my O-level exam, when the result came, I actually had a very good result. If you get that result, then it means you must continue studying. And that time I was only 16 years old. So I joined the A-level classes in the same school. And by that time, I started getting interested in doing medicine. And then the option was, do I go to England or do I go to a local university? The only medical school in East Africa was at Makerere. But because the decisions had to be made, my father took me to a very senior doctor in Nairobi, who had studied first part of the medicine in India. Then he did his postgraduate studies in England, and then he came to Nairobi, and he was practicing in Nairobi. When we went to meet him, he listened to my story, because I'd also asked, should I go to India? He says, between India and England, I suggest that you go to, I recommend you go to England to study medicine. But he said, I have just come back from a conference of surgeons at Makerere Medical School in Kampala, and I was really impressed by the medical school there. He suggested to me that I should consider going to Makerere University in Uganda, Kampala. And that made up my mind, because prior to that, 2 years ago, when we were young and we had gone to Uganda for a holiday, I had been on the campus of Makerere University. I was really impressed. There was a postgraduate student whom we met in one of the departments. He took us around the campus. And so I had already seen Makerere. And when I got a recommendation from the doctor that I should think of Makerere, I then decided I should go to Makerere.
Okay, things fell into place. I can imagine. Were there amongst your group of friends of more or less the same generation, did most people go to India to study or to the UK, or was it actually quite common at that time to look for universities in Kampala or in Kenya?
So basically, those who wanted to go to India would actually go after the age of 16 and to do the first part of education in India. So those who want to go to India would have by that time left. Now, those who continued education in Kenya, the option after 2 years was either you go to England or you go to local university. And many would go to England, because at that time, the education in England wasn't all that expensive, and it could be afforded quite well. But there were a good number who did go to the universities in Nairobi and in Kampala and in Dar es Salaam. I went to Kampala because at that time, that was the only medical school.
Okay. All right. And then you were in Kampala, you were studying, and you were still there around the time that Idi Amin came to power in Uganda, right? Or you just finished?
Okay, so I started doing medicine in 1967, June. And I finished my degree and I graduated in February of 1972. Amin came to power in January of 1971. So when we were in the final year, he was already the president of Uganda, and things were all right. We graduated in February of 1972. He is the one who conferred the degree of medicine on me and other students. So he was the chancellor of the university at the time. And then we came back to Kenya. Some, of course, worked in Uganda, and some went back to Tanzania because students mainly came from 3 different countries there. So I started working in Kenya. It was by June or July of that year that Amin decided that Indians should leave Uganda. And that's when people had to leave. So we were the last batch who were not affected at all.
Well, lucky you. That is quite remarkable to know that you actually got your degree from the man who then a few months later decided to expel all South Asians from the country. Well, but I'm glad that at least your studies weren't affected and you were already back in Kenya by the time that happened. So then you started up your medical practice first in Kenya, right? Or am I missing something? Did you go to the
No. So the first part of the training is that after you finish your degree, you must do 1 year of training, and you must pass that to be registered as a practicing doctor. So I did that part in Kenya. And this is also the time when you start thinking that when I finish my first year and when I register, what do I want to do? So some might decide to go and start general practice. The others might decide to do some other specialties like medicine or pediatrics or something. But in my case, the person who taught us dermatology in the final year at Makerere, he was very, very good. And I was really impressed by his teaching, but I also got at that time interested in dermatology. So I sort of knew that I want to do dermatology. So basically after my training, when the post opened up for dermatology, I applied for a post of dermatology to be trained as a dermatologist, and I actually got the post. So Kenya government had just started training dermatologists the previous year. So I was the second Kenyan doctor to be selected to do dermatology. And that was all the way back in 1973 and then going into 74. And then after a year, I came to England at the Institute of Dermatology to do a 1 year full-time course. By that time, of course, I was married. So me and Kundan, both of us came to England. We stayed for a year. I did the course, finished the course, passed the course, and I went back to Kenya. And of course, continued my work in the skin department at the main hospital where I was working previously. And I continued working there. But after 2 years, I also started my own part-time private practice in the evenings. So I was a government doctor, practicing dermatology and teaching dermatology to students and other doctors at the main hospital. And at the same time, I had my small private practice also.
Okay. Wow, grand. I was leafing through your book, and after a lot of wonderful chapters about family life and about your professional practice, you get to chapter 29, which all of a sudden says head waiter at the Mahajanwadi. And that's already in the 80s. But I want to use this sort of look at the place of religion or culture, whatever you want to define it as, in your life and in the life of the Osho community in Kenya at that time. Because from my reading of this chapter, the new Mahajanwadi or the new Derasa opened. So of course there was a lot of to do, a lot of visitors, but you sort of seem to have rolled into it by mistake, in the sense that you did a very good job hosting some people after a visit of your father to Palitana. And because you did such a good job hosting that dinner, all of a sudden you're in charge of a really important part of the festivities for the new Derasa. So what place did or does religion take up in your life, and how would you say that you rolled into all of these activities, well, mostly food-related activities at the Derasar and the Mahajawadi?
So the Majanwari was the main center or main focus for everybody. And when we were young, we would go to the Majanwari. My father was always a very good organizer, and he would organize most of our family or his friends' meals and other things. And I always would go with him to the Majanwari, and I would also help. So I grew up always helping in the Majanwari, whatever work was given, and I really enjoyed it. Then when I went to the university, we had an Indian Students Association, and that was an active association. So I started helping there. In the third year, I became the chairman of the association, and that was, I think, my main training ground for started organizing programs, because now it was up to me to organize programs, to execute programs, to decide what to do with my small committee. So that's where I got little more experience in organizing things. And then later on, we came back to Kenya, and of course the visits to Majanwari continued and helping continued. Then it so happened that our family had made some good donations to Palitana, in Palitana, and my father was invited to open up the halls there, and he was so happy that when the Palitana people were coming to Nairobi, he wanted to organize a big meal, and I became the main sort of organizer, because by this time I was old enough, I had enough experience, and it so happened that so many of the community elders were also invited there, and the function went out so well that the forthcoming soon the Nairobi Derasar programs were going to start. And they decided that they should make me the in charge of food serving and other things, which is actually quite a big job. So that's how I became the head waiter. But that was only a one-day program, and it went well. So when the main Derasar opening came, which was like 9 days of program, and I was again given the task along with another doctor. We two were jointly made in charge, and we did an excellent program. We had 400 volunteers. There was 9 days of meals, 18 in total 18 meals, and the last day there were 10,000 people were given a seated meal served on the table, because there was enough facilities and everything. So they up to this stage, it is mainly organization. The religion didn't matter much, but during that 9 days of the Derasar opening festival, I used to be there the whole day. Besides serving food, we will be sitting in other programs to see what is happening, and a little bit of other interest started coming, and then you talk with people, and now you're also growing up and deciding other things. And I started realizing that, of course, one part is there is lots of rituals and other things in religion, but there's other part is that you serve people, you help people, you look after people, you to a good path, and these are the things which sort of started impressing me. But as I started growing up, I also realized that in many religious programs, people get together, they meet from different towns, they come from other towns, they come, and I started realizing that a Derasar is a focal point which brings people together, Derasar, or then you start looking at other communities, temples, their facilities, and you realize that this is where people meet, people come to know each other, people exchange ideas. Weddings, engagements take place here. Somebody who hasn't got a business is shown by other people how to do a business. Somebody who's coming new, he will be introduced to others. So a lot of networking takes place, and this is one big advantage. So To me, like a bridge club or a golf club or another club, Derasari is also a club where people meet together, they exchange ideas, and each one benefits out of it, and also makes you better citizens.
Okay, no, that's an interesting reading of well, the effects of being the head waiter at the 9-day terrasse opening. I then want to sort of move on in time because you did your training, you started your medical practice, you were married, you had 4 lovely daughters in the course of these years. Compared to other Osho families, you guys stayed in Kenya quite long. In the sense that a lot of people I talked to left in the, somewhere end of the 60s, during the 70s. And then you hear stories of their licenses to conduct business were revoked. The situation was politically and socially difficult. So a lot of people chose to migrate a lot sooner than you guys did, because you guys only migrated in the beginning of the 90s to the UK. So could you tell me something about that period in the 70s when a lot of people started leaving?
So basically, Kenya got independence in 1963. And then after that, the Kenya government, majority of us who came from India, our parents who came from India were holding British passports. So when we were born, we were also having British passports. Now in 63, Kenya got independence. And in 2 years' time, the government started announcing that you people, those of you who have a British passport, you have an option. Either you become Kenyans or you continue with your British passport. But later on, as time comes, we want Kenyans to start taking over jobs and other things. So this is the time to decide now whether you want to remain British or you want
become
to become Kenyan. So in our family's case, my parents decided that we will become Kenya citizens. And so we became Kenya citizens. So we could stay as long as we basically want to stay. So those who didn't become Kenya citizens, they were sort of slowly phased out. Initially, it was the clerical people, those who were in work, in employment, and things like that. Later on, people who were in businesses, they were also asked to given a time that, we give you 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. That was fair because you decided not to be Kenyans. So you have to let then the Kenyans take over. So in our case, that didn't happen. But also what happened was that after independence and after 1970s, the economy boomed, the businesses got better, and my father and us, and I was also helping my father once I came back from my studies in England, though I was a dermatologist and had a hospital job. But because I was the only son in the family, and young ideas are needed, and because even as I was young, I was still going to the shop to help father. So I also started helping my father, and we were a team. So our business also did very well, and there was enough money flowing in, and enough savings were there. And the four daughters, as you mentioned, were all born in Kenya, and they were growing up. By this time, also we had, my sister was in England, Kundan's family was in England. So many of our friends had already settled in England. We were also seeing that in many countries that the conditions were deteriorating. Kenya wasn't all that bad, but by that time, crisis had happened in Uganda. Amin asked everybody to leave. In Tanzania, the government had taken up all the nationalized sort of all the properties. In Kenya, the situation was not bad, but you start looking at your daughter's future. They were still holding Kenya passport. So if they want to settle in the Western world, then it's better that they have another option also. And many of my friends are also thinking the same way. So we decided that if me and Kundan, if we emigrate to England, because somehow both of us had a right to UK, if we emigrate to England, then our daughters can join us, and automatically in a few years time they'll get British citizenship. But the other important thing was that soon they would come to an age when they will have to think of higher education and university education. And we thought that because we would send them to UK universities, even if we are in England, it is better. There are 4 of them, and the family finances would help us also. So that decision was to immigrate was taken because of those reasons.
Okay. No, fair. It must have been sort of a difficult decision to make, though, because from what I hear, and because you were born in Kenya, you were so active in so many ways in the Mahajawadi and then through your practice and in business, it's a lot to leave behind.
But when you come to that age, and you have 4 daughters, you also start thinking of children's future, and that becomes more important. And then you have to decide. And in my case, the decision wasn't difficult because my father also promoted it and my mother also promoted it. So, and we already had a sister in England, and Kundan's good amount of Kundan's family was already here. And we were regularly coming to England. We knew England very well.
Fair. So when you came to England, you decided to settle in Wellingborough, which is a bit outside London, so not the typical place to settle. But from your book, I know that you had friends there. And in Wellingborough, in the end, you did not take up the practice of medicine again. So I want to sort of talk about that decision, but the first thing I need to ask you about is, in your book on page 118, you tell us that Wellingborough is well known amongst the Oswalds and others for, and then there's a list. And the last thing on the list is Weetabix for our breakfast. Tell me about that.
Okay, so I already written why we decided on coming to Wellingborough and all those things. And main reason was that we wanted to settle in a smaller town, and we wanted to settle in a town which is not very far from London, and we wanted to settle in a town in which all the 4 girls can go to one school, so that to make life easier for us. It so happened that we had friends in Wellingborough. The children were going to this Wellingborough school, which we already knew about, and there was and Wellingborough was not far from North London. And so we basically chose Wellingborough from position of schooling, and also not far from London. And also we had friends who were already in Wellingborough. So that brought us to Wellingborough. And we had done a lot of research before coming to Wellingborough, before deciding on to Wellingborough, like most people would do. But then coming to Wellingborough and then writing about other things, though Wellingborough has got about 30 Oswald families, the next town has got 78 Oswald families. Wellingborough is quite well placed and quite well known as far as the Oswald community is concerned, because one of the big items from lentils and from spices which are used in Indian kitchens, a lot of importation is done by business in Wellingborough called Virani Foods, and so they are very, very well known, and that was one part of the story. And then also a lady called Hansaben, she used to cook in Wellingborough, but a lot of her she used to cook for lots and lots of weddings at the Oswald Center in Porter's Bar, and so most people knew Wellingborough. Also, Wellingborough, when we say Weetabix, the Weetabix factory is only 3 miles from our house. And in those days, lots and lots of Indians used to work in Weetabix. So everybody knows Weetabix, everybody knows Hansabe, and everybody knows.
I did not realize Wellingborough would be a culinary destination on sort of the Oswald map. I love it. I'm going to come and visit and eat there.
You're most welcome.
That sounds great. No, I was reading through it, like, Weetabix, what? But yes, thank you for clarifying that. But coming to that wonderful place full of exciting spices and foods, you decided to open a shop instead of going into medical practice further. How, why, what informed that decision?
Okay, so we were my father passed out in March of 1991. We were to immigrate in August of 1991. So my mother would be joining us. So when we come to London, I would be accompanied by Kundan, by 4 daughters, all still young, and by my mother. And wherever we settle, the girls will need to go to school. Kundan will need to run the house, and we will need to have we'll have to look after my mother also. Now I'm the only son in the family. The lucky part or the good part was that there was good family finances. So question of earning money was not there. There was enough money for us, and there was enough money for girls' education and for future also. And if I wanted to do medicine, either as dermatologist or even to go into a GP level, I still needed to work at hospital level for between 3 to 5 years. And this work would be 6 months in one hospital, 6 months in some other hospital, 6 months in another hospital. For the next 3 to 5 years, I will be basically away from home.
Yeah, plus so it's not for a family man.
Yeah, so also before you settle down well, it is like 7, 8 years before you can settle down well in medicine. So in my case, because the family finances were good, I took this option. Many of my friends, many other colleagues have come and they have worked. They have worked in different places, and they have managed. But also I wasn't the only son, and we're also a very social family. So I always wanted to be with people and do other things, and I also wanted to see that my girls also needed support in other things also. And then they were soon to start going to university, and I basically left medicine because of that. There wasn't much money in business at the time, so but I already knew those things, but I was independent. I was self-employed. That was the best part of it.
No, fair. So if you needed more time to spend with your family or on social things, you could just work a little bit less, or that's sounds like a fair decision.
And
but
also basically because I was self-employed, and coming to England, I, of course, didn't do dermatology, but in return, I did lots and lots of other things because I was free. I could organize programs, I did educational programs, I did health programs, I provided platforms for so many different things to people. And, you know, when I was talking about Derasas, I said, if Derasa is a place where people meet, people help each other and do things. I like to organize things where people meet, and this that is a pleasure I get.
That is how I've come to know you, as probably one of the main organizers that there are. So in lots of different ways. So programs where people meet, you say, but it's at the Derasa, but at trips as well, and all sorts of things. And then, you know, getting your entire memoirs written out and getting your very talented wife Kundan's contributions and hobbies in there as well. I think you both are, and by extent your 4 daughters as well, very organizing and busy people. So I do understand that to be able to do all that, you need to have time, and then being self-employed does really help. One of the things that I wanted to pick up on is I believe it's 95, you guys went together with some other families on a jatra of the 52 gams of the villages in Gujarat. Could you tell me a little bit more about how that came to be and why that visiting those villages is so important to your family, but to a lot of families I speak to, because you weren't born there. It seems so far away, and still there is sort of this need to every so often go and check up on them and go and see. So tell me a little bit about how that's important.
So my first visit to India was when I was 18 years old. And as mentioned before, both my grandparents on both sides were staying in the villages. And when I was there, I stayed actually 2 weeks in the villages. And those 2 weeks you always remember. Then coming to Kenya, we were going to India often, and we would again visit the villages. And now we moved here to England. But by that time, in February of '95, I'd gone to India, and I was sitting with my uncle in one of the weddings, and we started discussing about the discussion was about villages now, because you want to know where are our people, which how are they moving and things like that. So then my uncle suggested that Madhu, we should do a certain program where we can meet villages and other things. But 2 years before that, there were 3 Oshawas who had actually walked all the villages, and I had sponsored their walk. And when they came back, I told them for their itinerary, and also they gave me the video. So I had little background of this people walking all the villages over 17 days. So I told my uncle at that time, "Uncle, why don't we go to all the villages in a bus or something and meet everybody?" And he liked my idea and he supported it. My uncle in India also supported it. When I came back to England, I talked to Kundan and I talked to the girls, and they liked the idea. And there were people at the other hand to organize everything. So it all happened that the same year in '95, when Alpa was at university, Mala was in university, the other 2 girls were at school, and we could go in December. We asked our relations from Kenya to come. We asked our relations from India to come, and 30 of us went to all our villages over 4.5 days. The best program, the best traveling we've ever done. Most memorable. 9 hours of videos were taken by a professional videographer who accompanied us. Luckily, we have now got those videos on YouTube, and also we are promoting, even in my book is there, that all the villages, all our 9 hours are on YouTube. They can be watched, even little at a time, they can open and then again go, they can go to different areas. So this is the best part is, I think this is the only recorded thing about our villages which is there, which everybody can express.
Yeah, it's the most complete. Yeah, no, sure, and it's definitely comes recommended. Maybe watch it in parts, because the whole 9 hours is a lot to taking as
no, it's a lot, but because it's on YouTube and you can fast forward it, you can start at any level. This is the beauty of now YouTube and all this new technology.
So you said it was the best and most memorable program we've done. Of course, the villages where your grandparents lived, I can see how, you know, you feel a connection with them, but all 52. So why are these villages so important, do you feel? Because they're important to a lot of Oshawas, even those that were never born there, and even families where they now have 2 or 3 generations that weren't born there. There's still this connection. Why do you think that is?
So, you know, whenever we meet our parents or others at our age, not at our children's age, when we meet, we want to connect back to the village. So then we know, because our villages are not far, they're in a very small area. There are 52 of them, but they're in a very small area, and they are close by. So you have friends from different villages, you have relations from different marriages, different villages also. So somehow the connection becomes very easy when you say from which village you are. Then you can associate with so many things. Now, if we meet people here, then we say, are you from Nairobi? Are you from Mombasa? Are you from Thika? Are you from Embu? So that gives us, these are the towns in Kenya.
Yeah.
These are the towns in Kenya. So this is how we connect, and this is, but those villages become very, very important, because whenever any function is there or anything is there, then you start meeting people who all come from many of these villages, and also by way of marriage, by way of friendship, you start knowing these villages well.
Oh, that's interesting. So growing up and also as an adult in Kenya, were you sort of are people aware of the Gam, the village that their friends are from? Would you be able to say that?
Yes, yes. Our age group and our younger age group, yes. But you know what has happened now? At school, when children go to school, they are asked about where are you from? What about your roots and other things? So children also want to know a little. So today, parents, even in England, they want to take the children to Kenya to see their towns in Kenya. But people here also want to take their children to India and to our part of India and to see the villages. They can't go to all the 52 villages, but they would like to take the children to the father's village, to the mother's village, or to one or two other related villages. So this connection with the villages still continues. Now, the village population of Oshwal is very little now, so little. When we went in 95, there were still 4,000 individuals and 1,236 families. Now there are like 250 families and just like 1,000 people. But people who go from Kenya, people who go from here, also people from states, they still want to visit the villages, maybe just one or two or three, but the connection continues.
It's feeling that connection with their roots. So why has the population of the villages gone down? Has everyone migrated towards Jamnagar and other cities for jobs, or?
This migration started 1920 onwards because our part of India is arid and there is not much to do, not much to earn there. And even if you are staying there, you might need to go to Jamnagar every day to earn. So basically, the people who moved were better off. So people moved to Jamnagar, but lots of people moved to Mumbai or Bombay at the time, and they moved to other towns. But good number of good sized population moved to Kenya actually.
Of course,
and, yeah. And those are the people who moved to England. Not many of us did move to Uganda or Tanzania, but it was mainly Kenya. And majority of the people in Kenya moved to England. There are people who moved to Canada, to United States, and to Australia, and to few other countries. But it's mainly England is where we settled. Yeah. And also also in London.
Yeah, that's the impression that I got. No, fair. So I can't speak about this enough. So this is Madhu's book. And it's really a great compendium because it tells this story in interesting episodes with a lot of anecdotes and a lot of humor. If you are part of that community, you will recognize names and places, definitely. But from it also speaks your organizational talent and your love for travel and for quirky travel and low budget travel and all of those things. From its pages, again, I told you before we started this interview, the love for your daughters is so clearly there that it is touching, and for your grandchildren and for your family at large. But then I know that your daughters are now living all over the place, really. They studied in different places. They went to work in different places, and you and Kundan always went to visit, right? So can you tell me a little bit about how you see this spread out international family, you know, keeping, where are its roots, the roots of your daughters and your grandchildren? Should we be looking for roots at all, really? I mean, how do you see this evolving? Because a lot of Oshwal families are quite international, but I think you guys might be close to taking the cake, especially with all of your travels thrown in. I've seldom talked to someone who's seen that much of the world, I think.
So the basic story is like this. When you go to study at the university level, or then when you start your work, that's when you start meeting people. It's mainly at university and at work. So children started coming to England to study, and others went to India to study. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that the first Oshwal boy to get married to an English girl happened like 60 5 years ago. So this has started a long time back. And as more and more children were going out to study, to India, to England, more of these marriages were taking place, not only in the Oshawa community, but other communities also. And slowly, the community, the interesting thing about the Halari Visa Oshawa us is that we do not have, we have total freedom in our community. You can decide whom you want to marry. You can decide which religion you want to follow. There are no restrictions on anybody, except the only restriction is that if you're in an Oshawa place, you do not have non-vegetarian food and you do not have alcohol. Otherwise, we have no religious guru, we have no spiritual guru. Nobody dictates to us. We are independent. So this is at community level. Within the family, it's a different thing. So basically, there's nothing which said that, oh, we cannot marry outside. And as the things are changing in the world, this started happening. So by now, I think in England, probably 3 out of 5 weddings are of Oshawa girls marrying a non-Oshawa spouse. And this is all accepted. It is accepted by parents and adults also. In my case, 3 of my daughters found their spouses who are not Oshawas, and my mother accepted them. And my mother today is still with us. She is 95, and she had never had any objections to all these things. But as I said, this thing has started 65 years ago. So already a precedent was set.
You had some practice.
Yeah.
No, but then I wonder, so this Oshawa identity for people who move to Kenya and who lived in Kenya tends to be really important. And today, if you visit Potter's Bar, if you visit the Oshawa Center, you see that it is still, very much alive. But then for your grandchildren being born in a mixed marriage, you have an idea of what place that Oshawa identity, but also Jain religion plays? Do they know about it?
This is not an easy question to answer. I think in the beginning, for everybody, it's the same. Once you're about 20, 25, 30, when the changes come in life, when you start working, when you get married, then you're at an age where you start thinking of different things. And also, it's more of an environment which plays a part. In which environment you are staying, amongst with who are the groups nearby, and where are you working, and what is happening. And so that basically decides many things. So we are connected much more with the community. My children are less connected, and the grandchildren will be even less connected. But this is a thing everywhere. You look at the churches in England, and the congregation is so small now. So we are also heading in that direction.
Yeah. Okay, fair. Well, it's interesting to see how it will end up. But as you say, that is true everywhere. I'm also curious where my son, who's now almost 3, will end up when he going to university. So I now understand what a silly question it is to ask, really. But maybe sort of to wrap up, I wanted to go back to, again, this book.
Yes.
It's a great book. If people want to order it, by the way, do they email you? Do they, who do they contact?
No, it's very simple. The book is not for sale at all, anyway. I got enough books printed. And from the very beginning, I decided that all the people whom I know well, all the people who are mentioned in the book, all the people with whom I've done so many programs, all the relations, all the friends, not only in England, but in Kenya, India, I will get a copy to them. But also I decided that if anybody asks me that we want a copy, I will get there. I'll make sure that they get a copy. And if somebody recommends, please send one to him, or he would like to read your book, then the book goes to him, because the book has been written. And a lot of people there's lots of things which will interest people. There's lots of things which is not relevant to many. But I want more and more people to read. And also the most important part is there are very few books written by Oswals. Majority of the books are history of Oswals or have been written by somebody for Oswals. There are very few autobiographies, and we are doing very well as far as education is concerned. We are doing very well as far as businesses and professions and other things are concerned, but we do not write. And I know if I have written a book, I mean, Alpa writing a book is a different category totally. If I can write a book, many of my friends, my age group, they can write a book.
You want to inspire.
I want my book to go to people. I want more people to be inspired to write. It's not easy to write a big book like this, but they should write even at small level, even to get recorded like you are recording me now. So they must leave behind for the family and friends something written or something recorded behind. So I want to inspire more people to write or to tell their story.
Okay, well, that's grand. I can only second that and say I would also love all of you guys watching this to write up your stories or record them in some way. No, great. Madhu, thank you very much